Masayoshi Son recently made headlines for his troubled investment.
Told people you were going to raise a $100 billion fund. Did they tell you you were crazy?
Masayoshi Son might very well be the craziest investor of all time. A net worth of over $20 billion and once the wealthiest person in the world for 3 full days.
Maybe Bill does not know. For 3 days, I became richer than Bill in that day.
73rd on the Forbes list of the world's billionaires 2022 and 45th of the Forbes most powerful person list.
All go for bet everything for the future.
Masayoshi Son wants to fund big, audacious ideas and plans to establish a $30 billion fund. But just before he meets with potential investors, he fiddles with the slides and changes the fund size. The fund won't be 30 billion, it will be 100 billion. The investors laugh it off. But Masa, as he's often called, manages to secure a big bag of money for his $100 billion fund vision.
In 1 hour, you convinced him to invest $45 billion.
No, it's not true. 45 minutes, $45 billion. $1 billion per minute.
Masayoshi Son is notorious for bets in startups such as DoorDash, Klarna and ByteDance, which have added tens of billions of dollars to his fund. Not an advocate for excessive due diligence, he is known to commit billions to entrepreneurs after only 30-minute meetings. Even more extreme, he once made an investment of 20 million in Jack Ma's Alibaba when it was a tiny startup based solely on the gleam in Jack Ma's eyes. With all of this, his company Softbank became a major player in a number of industries through aggressive investment and rapid expansion. But there's also a dark side. Besides holding the record for the most profitable investment in history, he also experienced the biggest personal investment loss. He lost 70 billion during the dot-com crash.
After a number of high-profile losses, Masa's investing strategy has been described as one reliant on the so-called greater fool theory. Many believe he's just a crazy rich gambler who has a lot of cash to burn.
His philosophy? Rapid growth and market share at all cost. Profits will surely come later, but will they? Or could it be that this world is Masa's casino and we're just living in it? Masayoshi Son is born at a young age as the second of 4 sons to South Korean immigrants in Tosu. His parents migrate to Japan during the Japanese colonial period, and discrimination against Korean immigrants is extreme in the 1960s. Masa also suffers. He recalls being pelted with stones at school by his Japanese classmates.
Did you suffer discrimination growing up in Japan?
Yes, I had some experience, but I feel now it was good. That made me, stronger to work harder. I had to prove that I am not different from any other guys, not inferior, it's the same. So I had to work harder to prove the value.
Already at a young age, Masa exudes restless curiosity and energy that distinguishes real alpha characters in life. And he picks up some street smartness from his dad too. His father and other Koreans built their houses illegally on land owned by Japan National Railways. Even though it gets them in trouble with the authorities, his father is able to raise pigs and chickens on that land in order to provide for the family. And start an illegal sake business, which eventually makes his family the first in town to own a car. As a young Chad, Masa makes numerous attempts to meet with his idol, Fujita Den, president of McDonald's Japan.
He wrote a book, and that book became the bestseller. I was so impressed and said, oh my God, this is great. And the guy who wrote about it must be great.
At this point, Masa is 16 years old and he is about to unlock a new skill in his life, getting what he wants.
I called his assistant and long distance call. Back then it was so expensive. I made almost 100 calls and say, this is my name, I'm a student. Could you ask him to share me some time? And could you ask him? And he said, I will try, but he's not gonna meet with a student. I said, well, don't decide by yourself. Let him decide.
Masa is clearly determined to meet his idol. Similar to Kevin John followers, Masa knows that a short conversation with his idol could change his course in life.
So I spoke with the assistant, different assistants so many times, and they don't give me the right answer. So I said, okay, this is a waste of my telephone bill. So I flew into Tokyo and I said, I came because the phone call becoming more expensive than air ticket.
So what happened?
And I said, well, tell him exactly the way I said. You don't have to look at me, you don't have to talk to me, you can keep on working whatever you're doing. I just want to see his face for 3 minutes. So I'm not bothering him. I'm so impressed and respect him. I want to see him. And if you tell him that I'm not going to bother him, time is money, he says, I'm not going to damage his life, she actually asked. And he said, okay. Actually, he spent 15 minutes with me, talking face to face.
Maybe a bit naive, Masa asks Dan for the ultimate piece of advice.
Yeah, I asked him, what business should I do? Computer. That's the one. If I were you, at your age, at this time of the, don't look at the past industry. Look at the future industry. That's the one, computer industry. That's the one you should focus. If I were you, that's the one. So I said, wow, great.
So on the advice of Dan, he departs for the US to study English and computer science. When Masa arrives in the United States, his English is limited.
Do you speak any English?
But his ambitions are high. He completes high school in 3 weeks by taking the required exams at Serramonte High. He studies economics and computer science at the University of California, Berkeley. And at age 19, he falls in love with a microchip featured in a magazine. He is now convinced computer technology will spark the next commercial revolution, and he wants to be part of it. Masa starts his first business ventures while still a student. He now has a clear perspective on how to achieve his megalomaniac dreams of making billions. Working his ass off in a normal job is not a good use of his time.
So I said, okay, what is the best, most efficient use of my time? It's invention.
Any reasonable person might respond with, well, that's easier said than done. But not for Masayoshi Son.
So I set the alarm clock 5 o'clock, 5 minutes. Tick. In 5 minutes I said, come, invention, come. Right? So I did that.
And it worked.
From here on, he decides to come up with one idea per day and even hires a fellow student to stand in for him at lectures when a business matter calls him away. A move only high-performing gorilla investors like Masa can pull off. But it is his next couple of moves that constitute the very beginning of his rise to power.
I wanted to start my own company. So when I was a student at Berkeley at 19 years old, I already started a small company. Made the first electronic dictionary.
Yeah, pocket dictionary first. And
Pocket
translator and dictionary.
Yes.
And then sold it to Shaw.
Yeah, for $1.7 million. For a 19 years old kid, it's not bad.
Not bad.
Okay? And I did another computer game project, made me another $1.5 million. So I got a little over $3 million when I was 19. That was a good seed capital for myself.
Yes,
I never used the venture capital.
You never went out and raised money, but you had the money yourself. That's better because the fewer partners you have, the better off you are.
Well, if you could succeed.
Yes.
Masa starts Unison World, a video game company in Oakland. He later sells the company to an associate for close to $2 million, and Kyocera eventually buys it out. Finally, in 1980, Masa graduates with a BA in economics from Berkeley and returns to Japan.
Right after I graduate, I went back to Japan because I promised to my mother that as soon as I finish my college, I will be back to Japan. So I kept my word.
One would think the stage is set for him to start his next big thing. But no, Masa sits around for 18 months thinking and reading. He drives his family insane during that time, but he's adamant that his next venture will be a big one.
Imagine, if you will, sitting down to your morning coffee, turning on your home computer to read the day's newspaper. Well, it's not as far-fetched as it may seem.
Just as in the past, the Industrial Revolution, electricity, the automobile, and the airplane changed life in America, so today the computer is changing our world. The way we do business, the way we travel, the way we communicate with each other.
Masayoshi Son is fascinated by emerging technologies and how they are revolutionizing the world.
That was the beginning of the time of the personal computer got started. But there's hardware, not enough software. So I aggregate all kinds of software from the small software houses. And I wholesale to the PC stores. So it's like a bank, software's bank. It's not the money bank. The software wholesaling, storing in my warehouse. So it's like a concept.
His first attempts at making SoftBank big are a complete disaster. He books a sizable stand at a consumer electronics expo in order to get attention and close some deals and sell some software. Masa gives free spaces to the leading software developers in Japan, and he attracts crowds with a large sign that reads, "Now the revolution has come for software distribution for PCs." Masa attracts such a large crowd, he gets even more attention than the technology giant Sony. Yet, not a single software sale, not a single deal was made that day. Masa is disappointed, and some people start calling him a nice guy but dumb.
You are really dumb.
Nice guy but dumb? Huh? That is not how Masayoshi Son wants to go down in the history books, and luckily he has the perseverance to keep pushing, even though the odds seem stacked against SoftBank. And one lucky day, a couple of weeks after the exhibition, fate steps in. He gets a call from someone from a shop called Joshin Denki. They need software and might want to buy it from SoftBank. Can he come to Osaka for a meeting? Well, no, he can't, because he's too busy. Masa later recalls that he was simply too broke to afford the flight.
I'm broke, nigga, I'm broke!
Information asymmetry. Not taking the meeting would be a great mistake though. Joshin Denki is Japan's third largest home electronics retailer. Thankfully, Masa has more luck than money at this point. The company calls back to say that the company's president will be traveling to Tokyo where Masa is. Joshin Denki has just opened a computer store and is in dire need of more software. Rather than being grateful for the opportunity and accept the deal terms of Joshin Denki, Masa, as always, decides to go big or go home. He tells the company's president to let go of its existing suppliers and only trade with SoftBank, 100% exclusivity. Why? Because his dedication to software would take Joshin Denki to the top. This reveals everything about Masa's audacity. If you want to be the #1 PC dealer in Japan, you have to find the #1 guy in software distribution. That's me. Interestingly, his impertinence pays off. Other retail and publishing deals quickly follow. SoftBank's monthly revenues increase from around 10,000 to 2.3 million within a year. Masayoshi Son takes off. By 1984, 3 years after its founding, SoftBank controls 50% of the Japanese retail market for computer software. Meanwhile, its unwavering CEO is looking into new ventures. The company expands into telephone routers, magazine publishing, and broadband internet service. It is slowly but surely becoming the gigachat among Japanese companies, a true conglomerate.
He probably has the biggest guts in the world on doing investment. Yeah, right. Very few people in the world have that courage.
Too much guts, sometimes I lose a lot of money.
I know.
Masa expands his business by means of aggressive mergers and acquisitions, investing in 800 technology companies, including GeoCities, Ziff Davis Publishing, and the Comdex Computer Show. Some of these bets turn into disasters, such as Kingston Technologies, which cost SoftBank $1 billion. However, Masa realizes that one big winner could make up for all the other failures. At this point, SoftBank's main business is no longer selling anything. It has turned into a full-grown Japanese tech conglomerate, and its founder is focused on one thing: investing in other tech companies and startups, hoping to find the next big opportunity. Essentially, SoftBank is acting like a VC, but nobody would have imagined what happens next. Eric Hippo, the CEO of Ziff Davis, introduces Masa to a struggling small company. Its name? Yahoo. They want $5 million to develop their search engine technology. Masa offers $100 million. Yahoo's CEO Jerry Yang says that they don't need that much. Masa replies to him saying, "Everyone needs $100 million. Well, can't argue with that." In April 1996, Yahoo goes public.
The internet firm Yahoo went public today at $13 a share, closed up 20 points at 33 after trading as high as 43.
And SoftBank owns more than 1/3 of the company. And then, in the year 2000, history is made. Masa makes what is widely regarded as the best venture capital investment of all time.
At one point, you made an investment of $20 million in a little company that wasn't heard of by many people called, I think it was Alibaba. It became worth about $90 billion, now worth about $130 billion. So how did you decide that Alibaba was a good investment? And do you have any more like that you could recommend to us?
Well, the Jack Ma, not because of the business model, not because of the technology, it's because of his charisma in leadership. And China had enormous opportunity of the upside. I said, this is the guy that can be the leader.
Masa sees huge potential in Jack Ma, a sparkle in his eyes. He believes he could build something incredible. Initially, Jack Ma states that they do not need any investment at this time. They were only a few employees, no business plan and no revenue.
No business plan and zero revenue. Employees, maybe 35, 40 employees. But his eyes was very strong eyes, strong, shining eyes. I could tell from the way he talked, the way he looked at, he has a charisma, he has a leadership. So his business model was wrong. It's the way he talked, the way he can bring young Chinese people following him.
But Masa remains persistent, and as always he gets his will. They agree to a deal in which SoftBank will invest $20 million in the company in exchange for 1/3 of the company.
Well, our share price went up, and one time I was for 3 days richer than Bill Gates.
That same year, Masa becomes the world's richest man, surpassing Bill Gates. However, his reign is about to come to an end. The dot-com bubble bursts, the market crashes, and Masa loses more wealth than any single investor in history. At this point, most chimps would throw in the towel and give up. But not this guy. Silverback's son is going to come back. SoftBank is about to recover and the world is about to respect his name again. He spends the next decade taking even more risks and betting big. In fact, he's been referred to as a Wall Street bets trader, just with a lot more money to spend. And Masa is about to prove that he's a real finance degen. Masa's rise to the top is aided by more than just a keen sense of potential. On top of that, he's incredibly skilled at networking. Bill Gates and Larry Ellison become good friends with Masa.
I respect Bill so much, I never say no to him.
These friendships will be extremely beneficial to SoftBank. But perhaps the most memorable friendship is formed with Steve Jobs.
In 500 years later, people would compare Steve Jobs with Da Vinci. That's my view.
Masayoshi Son visits Jobs 2 years before he creates the iPhone.
And we are calling it iPhone.
And Masa has an insane proposal.
I said, if I would enter into the mobile business, mobile carrier business, I need a weapon. And who can create the best weapon in the world? I said, it's only one guy, Steve Jobs. I called him up and went to see him. And I brought my little drawing of iPod with mobile capability.
Yes.
And I gave him my drawing, and Steve says, Masa, you don't give me your drawing. I have my own. Don't give me your.
Don't need
crap.
your drawings, Masa.
Yeah. I said, well, I don't need to give you my, a dirty paper.
Yes.
But once you have your own product,
Yeah.
give me for Japan.
Yes.
And he said, well, Masa, you are crazy. We have not talked to anybody, but you came to see me as the first guy. I give to you.
Nothing is at stake for Jobs. The iPhone is non-existent at the time. Masa also doesn't have a mobile network. Nobody has anything. But this will change soon. In late 2006, SoftBank acquires and rebrands Vodafone Japan's network.
So I had to either get the license from the government for the spectrum or acquire Vodafone Japan. And first I applied for the license to the government, and the government said, no, there is no more spectrum. I actually sued the government. And for 1 year, big fight. But then the Vodafone Japan became available. $20 billion. I had $2 billion, so $18 billion short.
Where'd you get the money?
So I convinced the bank, that the Vodafone Japan, I'm going to turn around and become successful and become great cash flow. Believe me and lend me money.
He has the iPhone exclusive months later. That sounds amazing now. However, in 2007, it's not quite certain the device will hit the market as a big success.
In the past, the Japanese have preferred phones made by local OEMs like Fuji, Panasonic or Sony. And the iPhone is also missing important features such as SMS emoji support or a QR code reader, and the Safari browser is incompatible with some Japanese mobile websites.
But Masa has a solution. He floods the market with the iPhone, offering it for free with low-cost unlimited data plans. It works.
iPhone 3G.
Japan's most popular smartphone is now the iPhone, and SoftBank increases its user base from 16 million to 35 million. However, the SoftBank story is not without challenges. Masayoshi Son has to place increasingly sizable bets in his effort to take on the once all-powerful incumbent carrier NTT Docomo. To deliver internet connectivity to Japanese homes at a speed of 12 megabits per second, SoftBank invests close to $2 billion in building out a gigabit Ethernet network. Users naturally adore this, particularly at $21 per month. Every 30 days, 7,000 new subscribers sign up on average. However, SoftBank is investing $250 to bring in these new clients, which explains the company's enormous $3.9 billion debt. So, should Masa take it a little easier? Maybe, but he won't. It is not his style. After all, this is the same person who in a government meeting threatened to light himself on fire due to a regulatory disagreement with NTT. Yes, the story is true. I did threaten to set myself on fire inside the telecommunications ministry, but I did not take any petrol along. Masa believes that ultra-fast internet will provide benefits that cannot be predicted until they happen, and that SoftBank will be the ultimate driving force. The same reasoning backs another one of Masa's major bets. After investing $21.6 billion to acquire control of Sprint, he becomes chairman in 2013. Masayoshi Son is counseled, as he has been before, against purchasing an ailing business in a sector with an unclear future. The combination of the third-ranked mobile companies in Japan and America is dubbed a merger of losers by observers. And in fact, the fall in SoftBank shares following news of the acquisition cost him $1.3 billion in personal wealth. In his quest for the next big thing, Masayoshi Son invests in computers, robotics, emerging companies, and even comes up with a 300-year plan for the company. He goes on a spending spree and invests in every hyped up tech company imaginable. Masa has stated repeatedly, "I believe the next big bang is going to be even bigger. I want to be ready for that." However, due to limitations of capital that is being tied up elsewhere, he misses out on some opportunities. For instance, he meets with Jeff Bezos to discuss investing in Amazon in its early stages.
I'm so stupid. Don't embarrass me. I'm so much regretting my life. He and I were just one-on-one in a small hotel in Switzerland, talking a couple of hours, investing, and he and I almost agreed. And
what year was this?
Before his IPO. So we were talking. SoftBank invest $100 million to own 30% of his company, and so the valuation we were talking was like $300 million. And he said, "No, Masa, you're crazy. We're not 300 million company." He said, "We are 350 million company." So the gap was only $50 million, and we were talking, and I said, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe we're close enough, and I would talk to my guys in Tokyo and come back to you. And I right after the trip, I went to talk to my guys, and everybody said, maybe that's crazy idea. Maybe you're right, but where is money? And after discussing 1 hour, I said, well, you're right. We don't have money. So we gave up that idea.
Determined not to miss out on the next Amazon because of capital constraints, Masa realizes he needs so much money that he would never be limited again. As a result, he comes up with the idea of the 100 billion Vision Fund.
It was kind of a shocker when Masayoshi Son announced the Vision Fund and his plans to raise $100 billion to invest in the tech space. It's the largest technology investment fund ever.
$100 billion? Well, that was something equity to buy things? Man, that's a lot.
A fund larger than the entire $75.3 billion venture capital industry in the United States in 2016.
The Vision Fund, it's supposed to be a fund of $100 billion?
Yes.
Now that would be the biggest fund ever raised. So when you told people you were going to raise a $100 billion fund, did they tell you were a little crazy?
Well, some people said.
Softbank itself is a big investor in the fund with an investment of $33.1 billion. Other investors include Abu Dhabi Mubadala, Apple, Qualcomm, Foxconn, Sharp, and others. However, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia is by far its biggest investor. Masa flies out to meet the Saudi Crown Prince to persuade him to invest in his Vision Fund. While en route in his private jet, Masa casually alters the amount they are asking for in their presentation from 30 billion to 100 billion. They must aim high, Masa reminds his team.
You had a meeting with a man who was the Deputy Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who's now the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And as I understand the story, you went in and in 1 hour you convinced him to invest $45 billion.
No, it's not true. 45 minutes, $45 billion. $1 billion per minute. Well, actually, I said, you came to Tokyo as the first time. I wanna give you a gift. I want to give you a Masa gift, a Tokyo gift, $1 trillion gift. And he opened up his eyes and said, okay, now it's interesting.
All right.
So I woke up him and said, here is how I can give you a $1 trillion gift. You invest $100 billion to my fund, I give you $1 trillion.
With this much capital, Masa is unstoppable. His investments are so aggressive. The minimum per round is $100 million, 20 to 40% shareholding. This means control. He gives companies and startups far more money than they actually need. Oh, VC Beta Chimps Limited offered you 40 million. How about we give you 400? He encourages startups to think 10 times bigger than they were planning planning to, and to spend wildly and pursue growth at all costs. How could there ever be a problem with that? Here's the thing, all of Masa's cash, the large checks he is writing, are hurting the founders and the companies he's investing in more than they are helping.
There are some bets that just in retrospect seem silly. For example, Zoom, the company that wanted to make robot pizza and then pivoted to revolutionizing the food industry and eventually basically crashed and burned. Probably the best example of a sort of self-inflicted injury is Oyo. This is the company that came out of India, created a platform for hotels where people could book a room and expect a reliable service, which was a considerable feat for India. And their target seemed to have been just the raw number of rooms available on their platform. As of last count, they had over 1 million rooms, but they were nowhere near profitability. It's a prime example of the kind of growth at all costs that does come with vision fund money that could take a good company and a good business idea and essentially ruin it.
Essentially, he's accused of using money as a weapon. He's pouring limitless funds at startups in the hope that the startup with the highest funding will be able to outspend everyone else, and it's kind of a winner-takes-all situation. But unfortunately, this means that the companies he invests in don't really prioritize building a long-lasting, profitable business.
And he's not always faithful. Some companies complain that Masa would first show them a lot of love, only to abandon them for a new catch. Even crazier, when companies try to refuse Masa's money, insisting they don't need it, he threatens to invest in their competitors in order to get them to accept his money. By 2020, the fund has made a lot of investments.
As of last count, there were 88 portfolio companies at Vision Fund. More than $10 billion was invested in Didi, a Chinese ride-hailing app. Uber took about $7.7 billion. Some $4 billion went into WeWork. Another 3 into Grab, a Southeast Asian ride-hailing company.
In 2019, Softbank says that based on its analysis of the companies in the Vision Fund's portfolio, the fund is making money. It is doing alright. Masa aims to raise $100 billion for a new fund every few years, investing roughly $50 billion in startups each year. But then 2020 happens.
COVID-19, the disease that defined our lives in 2020.
2020 is now the deadliest year in U.S. history.
The COVID crisis impacts so many industries as the virus forces businesses across the globe to close their doors. The Vision Fund is invested in a number of companies that are severely impacted by the pandemic.
I guess some of the Vision Fund's investment practices have made it uniquely vulnerable to the COVID pandemic. In part, their heavy exposure to ride-hailing. They invested in all the top companies, and it's by far the biggest segment. The fact that their companies are geared for high growth and not necessarily profitability.
SoftBank Group says its Vision Fund lost $17.7 billion in its last fiscal year. That's after writing down the cost of bad investments. The Vision Fund went from SoftBank's biggest profit maker a year ago to its biggest drag on earnings. In Vision 2, I don't know, seems like an uphill battle for sure.
Some of their high-profile investments lose a lot of money. WeWork is a prime example. In a matter of weeks, the company goes from valuations in the tens of billions to a failed IPO.
And SoftBank is concerned about the valuation that WeWork could get in the public market.
When WeWork IPO so spectacularly imploded, SoftBank essentially had to step in and pretty much buy the company. They came up with a $9.5 billion rescue package and now own about 80% of the startup, which essentially makes it their problem to make them profitable.
It is an all-out investment. In a way, only SoftBank can do it. But with the health crisis and chaotic management, read Adam Neumann smoking joints on private jets, WeWork's value takes a nosedive. From a valuation of $47 billion to $2.9 billion. Masa acknowledges that the $9 billion bet is a mistake, despite his continued belief that WeWork will eventually be profitable. unacceptable. In an effort to plow forward, Masa creates Vision Fund 2 with a target of $108 billion, of which $38 billion would come from SoftBank itself. But the amount is reduced due to lack of investing partners other than Masayoshi Son himself and SoftBank Group. Masa finds it difficult to convince investors of the worth of his work, in part due to failures with companies like WeWork, OneWeb or Wirecard.
We are in a defense mode. The world is still very volatile. The inflation is still severe. Interest rate is going up. In the difficult time, we kept on divesting our asset. We reduced the new investment. We now have a much more managed conservative approach in terms of new investment. Therefore, our cash piled up significantly. That made us reduce our loan to value to 14%, which I have announced that we go into the defense mode. We deliver the defense mode result. Well, I'm still cautious. Nobody knows what happened next month. The COVID is not completely over yet. Inflation is still going on worldwide, but who knows? It's a tough market, so I will keep our company in the defense mode.
SoftBank Vision Fund reports a record $27.4 billion loss for the financial year that ends on March 31st, 2022, as the value of its stock portfolio has plummeted. Of course, when it comes to investments in private companies, SoftBank remains the biggest of them all, driving up valuations. But Masa's aggressive investment choices in previously overhyped and consequently overvalued startups has caused SoftBank's valuation to fall. Yet, when VCs call his tactics too aggressive, his response is always, they can say whatever they want, I just want to do it my way. If you asked him now if he regrets taking all of these crazy risks, he would say,
there are two kinds of people when you make mistake. One kind of people don't want to admit that you have made a mistake, and those people try to make all kinds of excuses and justify what you have made the decision in the wrong way. And the other group is accept and admit the mistake. And I'm the kind of guy, I would rather, accept my stupidity and my ignorance, my bad decisions, so that I can learn.
He is all in when he commits to something. His mindset has always been one of high risk, high returns. It does not matter how the SoftBank saga around Masayoshi Son ends in the future. Masa has stated that he wishes to be remembered as
crazy guy who bet on the future.
And whatever you think of him, it's difficult to argue with that.